everyone. My name is Tim Russell, Vice President, Community Engagement and Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion for WTTW and WFMT. And welcome to today's Chicago Tonight Latino Voices, a WTTW News Community Conversation. WTTW is committed to producing and presenting trusted, best-in-class content fueled by distinctly Chicago sensibility. We have served as Chicago's window to the world, and our purpose is to enrich lives, engage communities, and inspire exploration. One of our core values is diversity and equity. We celebrate differences, embrace inclusivity, and strive for equity. The stories we tell, as well as the people in front of and behind the camera and microphone, reflect the myriad of faces and voices of our region. Tonight, Chicago Tonight, on-air reporter Joanna Hernandez will moderate today's conversation on the Day of the Dead, Dia De Los Muertos, and the significance of the celebration in Chicago's Mexican community. Support for Chicago Tonight Latino Voices is provided by Allstate and the Chicago Community Trust. Additional support is provided by the Abe and Ida Cooper Foundation, the Field Foundation of Illinois, Lloyd A. Fry Foundation, and Judy and John McCarter. Finally, thank you to our members and viewers for your support. Your support allows us to engage with our diverse communities. We appreciate your support and thank you for allowing us to be your window to the world. Now I would like to welcome Joanna Hernandez.
Hello and welcome to Chicago Tonight Latino Voices, a WTTW news community conversation. Thank you for spending your evening with us. I'm Joanna Hernandez, reporter for WTTW Chicago Tonight. As we know, El Dia de los Muertos honors dead relatives, remembering loved ones and celebrating their ancestors. While the holiday originated in Mexico, it is celebrated throughout Latin America. Tonight, as we prepare to honor and celebrate our late loved ones, we'll talk with community leaders about this holiday, its significance, and who they'll be remembering. You're all in listen mode only, but that doesn't mean you can't be part of the conversation. We want to hear from you, so please chime in the chat function with your questions and comments. I'll be sure to share them with our guests. And speaking of our guests, I'd like to introduce our panel. We have a full panel today, and we want to thank them for taking their time and spending this evening with us. So first, we're going to start off with Cesareo Moreno, Chief Curator at the National Museum of Mexican Art. I hope I said your first name correct.
Cesareo.
Cesareo, there we go, Cesareo, thank you, I apologize. Then we have Esperanza Salgado, owner of Brewja Co Gallery in Evergreen Park, which is hosting a Day of the Dead event on November 5th. Thank you for joining us. And then we have Reverend Laura Gonzalez of Terror by Laura Gonzalez. She's part of Esperanza's event, talking about Day of the Dead's history and traditions. And then we have Carina, Yepez, and Norma Rios-Sierra, who are part of the Comfort Station's Day of the Dead installation in Logan Square. And finally, we have Isabel Hernandez, a Pilsen resident who created a 15-foot ofrenda to honor more than 250 people lost to COVID-19. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. So I want to start off first with you, Moreno. First, although many people might already know the meaning of El Dia de los Muertos, can you just remind us why we celebrate this tradition and this holiday?
Sure. Well, thank you for inviting all of us. And Dia de los Muertos has been a part of the Mexican communities on both sides of the border for a long time now. In the US, it was in the 70s, and it maybe had a little bit more of a political, cultural idea, but the true roots of it is to honor our ancestors and our families, members who are still a vital and a very important part of our families, even though they may not be physically with any longer. And the celebration has changed over time, as well as over space, right? So different regions celebrate it differently, but at the heart of it is a spiritual celebration that remembers and honors those who are still a part of our family.
So it's very special to a lot of people.
Yes, yes. And the rituals are very different, like I mentioned, from place to place. I can continue if you'd like, but I know that there's a lot of people who can also speak to the rituals.
We'll come back. Well, thank you. Well, Reverend Gonzalez, ofrendas are, of course, a tradition of Dia de los Muertos. Can you please remind us of some of other traditions and the meaning behind them?
of course, they are originally, the very origin is believed to be 3,000 years ago, and is part of a harvesting celebration. So it's to honor Mother Earth. And the ofrenda DNA that comes from the ancestral people is mostly the flowers and the fruit that we put on the displays. And after that, after the colonizers arrived to the Americas, they brought their Catholic traditions, and with it, a lot of pagan traditions. And now you have this intertwined amalgamation of both cultures, Indo-European and then Native American, Mexican, indigenous. And of course, now with that combination is, you know, the altars, the food, the music, the marigold, the, you know, singing, the, of course, wonderful oral tradition of our ancestors. And in my very personal opinion, a very healthy and cathartic way to honor and mourn our beloved dead, and a way to keep them alive by keeping their names and their, you know, what they like, what they dislike. You know, it's very traditional to put on the altar their food, their toys, their, you know, personal trinkets and whatnot. And that also was something that the Aztecs did, so-called Aztecs, that's not the correct name. And it was more like a grave marker, unlike the I forget, Egyptians, that the Egyptians will bury the dead with their belongings to go on to the afterlife. This was more about kind of like a marker, you know, who they are. So you will bury me with my tarot cards, and, you know, because I'm a tarot reader.
So there's so much history.
Oh, yeah.
And Esperanza, I want to ask you, some people think that Dia de los Muertos is Mexican Halloween. Now, what are some common misconceptions of this holiday that you would say?
Oh, well, that's like the big one. I think that a lot of, well, let me start with the question and then go off on my little tangent about it. But I think the biggest thing is that a lot of corporations have co-opted into the tradition and have created this sort of like removal from like its actual tradition of like honoring our ancestors and indigenous culture alongside with our religion, or, you know, like colonial religion. But I think that with that co-opting, we have now started to see a wave of people who don't necessarily appreciate the culture or the people in the culture, but just want another reason to celebrate, just celebrate, to have a party or whatever it is. So something that you know, I firmly stand in and make sure that even in my events that it is clear that, like, although we are celebrating for a very specific reason. And it's also to keep the tradition alive and to remember where we came from and who we are. So the biggest like misconception is, I think, that, and that the sugar skull painting like La Catrina and all that is just like another reason to be aesthetically like a model or beautiful, or which it is beautiful, but in the sense of it just being a fashion statement or, you know, any of that stuff. It's not that. It is very near and dear to many of our hearts. And my thing is, if you can't accept the people and the culture, then don't co-opt into this and into another holiday like other ones.
That's very true. And just talking a little bit more about that, Carina and Norma, does it ever bother you when, you know, you start seeing, you know, restaurants or different stores, you know, selling Dia de los Muertos items, you know, that maybe are not from Latin America, but they are celebrating it?
Yeah, I think a lot of why I do what I do, because along with curating the event at Comfort Station, I also I make sugar skulls and I sell them. And I used to teach classes and workshops. And really a lot of the reason why I did it was because it's something near and dear to me, and just the way that it's becoming so much more trendy and just fashionable. It just makes me want to educate people more on the fact that it is an ancestral tradition with deep indigenous roots, and that needs to be respected, like Esperanza and Laura said. It's such a beautiful thing, and I can understand how it draws people, and I want people to like my culture, and I want there to be awareness of what we're seeing. But I do feel that along with that, we also need to educate people constantly about what this is and what we're really celebrating. And I think too, something really important for people to know is if you are creating an altar, because we can all celebrate Dia de Muertos, but if you are creating an altar, you have to make sure that the people that you're putting on your altar are people that would want to be on an altar. You know, think about who you're putting on there, and is it something that they would have wanted, you know? So yeah, it does bother me, but it also pushes me to do more what I do, for sure.
More outreach.
Right.
And, you know, Carina, you know, I want to ask you, for people who don't celebrate, you know, this tradition and this holiday, you know, how can they be part of it?
Yeah, part of the work that Norma's talking about at Comfort Station was started with a conversation around public art and what was the conversation going to be about. And one of the prompts that inspired me was to think about, how do we honor? Who do we honor? And in what way do we honor? And these were the conversations we were having with the community, with the public in Logan Square, to have these conversations, and for them not to just finish the conversation in Logan Square, right? But to continue that at home and with their loved ones. And I think there's a lot to say about the celebration in regards to the steps of healing and processing. And I think that in that form, it becomes a little bit more inclusive of a celebration, right? For those who are interested in honoring and listening to their own ancestors.
Oh, thank you for sharing that. And Isabella, thank you for joining us. I do want to ask you, you know, you created an ofrenda for the second year in a row to honor people who lost their lives to COVID. You know, I do want to ask you, we have some images of it that we would like to show. You know, what has the response been like from the neighborhood as a part of it? You know, it's beautiful what you did here. You know, what's the feedback that you have from your neighbors?
Well, they saw my last altar, so they weren't surprised, but a lot of people misunderstand that. They think that we are celebrating the death. And I'm saying, this is a celebration of life. We're celebrating their lives. It's nothing related to the death, because that people think this is a sad thing, why we are be celebrating that they died. I'm like, we are celebrating their life. That's why we call ofrenda, because we're offering them the things that they enjoy in life. And one of the most important things, we're gonna die as well. So we want to be remembered as well. So we have to pass on the children, so they keep remember their ancestors, their grandparents, great-grandparents, and who doesn't want to hear stories about their ancestors, their great-great-great-grandparents?
Do people who pass by and see this, have never seen one before, that you've been educating them?
Yes, I think I've been trying to steal other people to do the same, that they never did it before, even if they're Mexicans, because they never did it at home. And to realize the real meaning of an ofrenda. So now they are beginning, trying to do something about it and trying to keep this tradition to their children. Because as I told you, we're gonna die as well. We're gonna die, and we want to be remembered the same. So we can keep just passing the tradition, so it doesn't die. It's a beautiful tradition that we have for many years, for thousands of years from our ancestors. So it's a beautiful thing that we should be proud of it, that we are celebrating their lives.
How did you feel creating that, you know, putting all the pictures there, putting it together? What was that feeling like? I'm sure.
I think people because I let them get into to see the altar, and when they see the very young faces, because I have a lot of people that are in their 20s, 30s, then they realize that we can die at any time. because we think, yeah, I'm probably gonna die when I get old, a viejita, 60, 80 years old. But when they see people that are in their teens, 20s, 30s, that is, you can lose your life in seconds. So it's something so beautiful that someone put up an altar and remember their life. I asked everybody who sent me the pictures, I told them, give me the name. I want to put the name because that face, the person had a name. So I wanted the name of each one.
Thank you. And Carina and Norma, I want to talk about the comfort station photos. I mean, their installation. We have some photos that we're going to show here. You were touching up on it a little bit. You know, what has it been like to work together with your community to create this altar and this installation where the community can come in and join in and get creative and, you know, do this work?
Well, you know, we're Northsiders in Logan Square, you know, so I know that in Pilsen and Little Village and the South Side, there seems to be this richness of art and culture, and you see that there's a history of celebrating Dia de Muertos. And so I feel like this is one of the first times I've ever seen a celebration of Dia de Muertos in my neighborhood. So I think from our families too, it's very, they welcome it. They love it. It's part of our cultura. It's part of who we are. And so it's been really nice because I've been visiting different schools, elementary schools, and working with the parents. We're also, Comfort Station is working with the Logan Square Neighborhood Association. And so they have a parent mentor program in our schools. And so I've been working with the parent mentors, and they just embrace this. They really love this. And we need so much more of this, especially out here in these areas where there's a lot of gentrification and displacement. We could really feel it because we don't see as many of us in our communities. And so we need to see that reflection when we're here. You know, it really helps our mental health, our well-being. There's so many things that are interconnected when you celebrate art and culture, especially with our Latino communities, because it's so ingrained in who we are, you know. So it's been beautiful. I love working with that within our schools and with our parents, for sure.
And Carina, is there something that you could share when you were working out there with different people, an experience that touched your heart?
Yes, specifically, I was working with the fiber material. So I was sewing, we were working with our hands, and that was really special. And having that bond with the person that is sitting down for 1 or 2 hours out of their day to talk and to release during this process was really special. It was different workshops throughout 2 months through 2 months. So that was really great. And for the people to be able to, the community to take home materials, take time to come and drop off materials, to have a conversation, to want more, you know that it's needed, it's wanted, because our community, like Norma said, beautifully said, right? We want more. And because of the lack of representation and even just the material aspect, I'm very biased, right? Because I work with my hands, I work with materials and fibers, but that matriarch and that power that is passed down to us, that we often forget because of capitalism or because of our fast culture. It's so important, and it was so beautiful to see it manifested in this way.
And then we're talking about different generations, correct?
Oh, yes.
Talking about second, third, fourth generation is passing it down. Laura, I see your hand up. Do you want to say something?
Oh, I want to say a lot. I want to tap into something that Santa said earlier about Mexican people not knowing the origins. What got me started into this 36-year research project that I will never end is when I was doing this, I'm from Mexico City, and in Mexico City we do this offerings at school. And I did an Aztec one, and my teachers were telling me that I was wrong, that this was a Catholic celebration. And it is not a Catholic celebration. It is now intertwined with religion, but it is really important not only for Mexican Americans and the children of people who cross the border or the border cross them, but it's also important for us Mexicans because some of us don't even know where the traditions come from. And just because it's been done that way, we just continue doing it. And I am the kind of person that I want to know where it comes from and who started it and why we do it. And another thing that Norma and Carina said, death is not the end. Death is part of life. What is the opposite of dying is being born, you know, but death is part of life. And we celebrate the life of the people, and we celebrate this, whoever's a matriarch, my heart just swelled up because this is a celebration that originated to honor the earth, the mother, the goddess, the, you know, that matrilineal tradition and sustainability of the earth. It is, after all, an agricultural celebration, you know, but all that got a little bit lost when the colonizer religion tried to erase it. And by trying to erase it, they make it huge, you know, so it's just wonderful and a great way to celebrate life and to continue celebrating, especially this year. It feels like it's everywhere because we have lost so many people to COVID.
No, that's very true. No, thank you for sharing that. And Esperanza, I want to go to you. Can you tell us about the event you have coming up this week?
Yeah, so next week on Friday, I'm opening up the shop. It's usually functions as my studio and like for community events for other artists. And but this is the first one that I decided to do as a solo exhibition. And I knew that, you know, I wanted to present my art in a way that felt like community and felt like that you can come into my shop and know that you are safe and that we are going to have this celebration together by having not just art but also music. I'm going to have a live guitarist play, and then I'm going to have Laura present on just like a very short journey of you know, pre-colonial times to now. So this event is both personal and like on the grand scheme of things, like what do we see cross cultures? And so I think it's going to be a very intimate event where we get to not only share our art and our craft, and but it's also a moment of just being able to grieve and celebrate life together. And so it's completely new works. And as an artist, I do a lot of self-introspection and try to pull of where is this coming from. Because oftentimes we do believe that we almost feel alone, but like thinking of like where my beliefs come from, where my history comes from, where, you know, my wisdom comes from, it's generations upon generations. I think we focus a lot on the generational trauma of death, and there are also like generations of survival and, you know, making sure that we can keep passing this on. So this event is just more than just like, oh, okay, we just get to see art and all this stuff. It's about really like having these intimate conversations and, you know, just being human together.
And I think that's more important now, right? Especially with COVID and all the separation that we had to deal with, you know, a lot of places being closed, you know, even talking to Moreno, the museum has an exhibit. I know it was closed for a while. You know, I want to talk about the exhibit that's happening, remembering people who are lost, including Alan Toledo, the boy shot and killed by police in Little Village this spring. So I want to show some footage of the Ofrenda and the exhibit now. Can you tell us about the exhibit and some other events that you have planned this weekend?
Sure. So the exhibition, this is our 35th annual, and what you're looking at right now is the COVID Memorial Ofrenda by Alejandro Nello. He came from Mexico, Valle de Bravo, and he created a contemporary ofrenda memorial. We asked people to upload photographs, and we received over 200 images that we placed on the ofrenda. You can see them there at the bottom. That really is, to me, the heavy part of this ofrenda. Putting these photos up that represent families was a very difficult thing. There are other pieces that look at the essential workers in our community and how they on the front lines. And then, of course, in our own community, Adam Toledo, who was killed earlier this year at 13-year-old boy. And so here in the ofrenda, we really sort of we look at his life, we celebrate the life of a boy. And I think that's what really sort of resonates with people, that how young he was. Sandra Cisneros created this piece for her mother. It's called A Room of Her Own. And she looks at her mother not as a mom, but as a woman. And she sort of looks at and celebrates the things that she loved during her lifetime that had nothing to do with being a mom or a daughter or a wife. So we have a little bit of everything. We have traditional ofrendas, we have contemporary installations, and this weekend, Saturday the 30th, we're having the Day of the Dead Chicago Festival. Rain or shine, people from the community come out and they create their own ofrendas. So we generally have around 60 to 80 ofrendas that are created out there. They're just there for the day. So it's true to the tradition in that ofrendas don't last, 3 months like our exhibition does. Ofrendas are up for a few days. It's beautiful to see when the community comes out and it's little kids, it's grandmothers, it's everybody, and they create an ofrenda for their family, their loved ones. And then they sit down around it, next to it, and they spend the rest of the day answering questions and telling stories. And I've got to say, somebody else had mentioned the storytelling. That's such an important part of Day of the Dead. The storytelling is what keeps them alive. It keeps their memory coming back every year. We say their names, the children learn about them, and it's in telling the stories where we really mourn and celebrate at the same time. It's a very bittersweet kind of celebration because we're remembering someone who's not here anymore, but we're keeping them alive in our hearts. And I think it's the storytelling is what helps the children understand where they came from. And those of us who knew the people who are no longer with us, it helps us not let go completely, but kind of come to terms with the inevitable. As Esperanza was saying, it's what happens to everybody, right? No one here gets out alive. If I may also, the beautiful thing, and I'll be very quick about this, the beautiful thing about the Dia De Los Muertos is that it's very malleable. Everybody can make it their own, but at the same time, that's where the risk lies, because people can take over it, and for greed and marketing purposes and mass production, they can really kind of screw it up. And I think all of us here in the Zoom, I think we personally will be continuing to defend the true roots of it. And yes, we want to share our traditions and our celebrations with the world, but the respect, as somebody else mentioned, the respect has to come first, and you need to understand what it is before you start playing with it.
Very true. I asked this question, Laura, do you feel that this year, because of COVID, it feels different when it comes to this tradition, or what are your thoughts on that?
We definitely have more of a need, right? This coming from a spiritual point of view of healing. We definitely have more of a need. Last year, for the first time in over 100 years, cemeteries in Mexico City were closed, which is something that hasn't happened since the times of the revolution. So I think this year, collectively as humanity, we are mourning more, and we are more in need of a safe space to do so, and to continue celebrating life, and to be grateful, to be able to continue living. Some of us that have survived this pandemic, year and a half. I also see a lot more curiosity from people who are not of Latinx or Latino or Mexican American. And I personally, as Cesareo said, you know, I continue making my passion to continue teaching this, because the only, you know, the difference between appreciation and appropriation is education. And education is what is going to save us all from a culture being ripped off from the people. You know, we want to stop the colonizing and we want to decolonize it, you know. So going to the roots, going to where it comes from, going to where is it celebrated, where is not celebrated, how we do it, etc. I think there is definitely a need to reconnect with sacredness. And this happens in every time that humanity goes through big trauma and need to reconnect with whatever you call her. I call her, whatever you call God, you know, is need to reconnect. And that's why we're doing this with Esperanza, you know, we're continue educating and knowing that there's nothing scary about death. If you touch your face, she's there. So death don't come and take us. She comes out of us because she's always been here inside of us. So there's nothing to fear. It's just our relationships change. They're not the same. They evolve.
Would anyone feel comfortable, you know, sharing why Dia De Los Muertos is very special to them, or someone they are remembering?
So I mentioned this prior to, like, you know, opening it up in the webinar to Tim. And one of the things that I was mentioning is that I didn't actually grow up seeing the altar or Dia de Muertos. I only heard it in story of what my parents would do around this time back in Mexico. And they would describe the town, and I would always have like this, you know, the imagination of like it being completely covered in orange and not really fully understanding, you know, what it feels like to be a part of that other than theory. And as I've been growing up, and like I always heard kind of like, oh, around this time we would be doing this and this, like when we were younger, and I never got to see any of it. And so as I was growing up, you know, I was like hanging around Pilsen, and I started kind of understanding the feeling of not necessarily saying goodbye to someone, just goodbye for now. And it was something completely special to me when I finally had that moment of like, mi tia Caritina never left. Mi abuela Jesus never left. Like they've always been walking with me. They've been making sure that I'm safe. They've been making sure that I'm okay, even if they're not present to say it verbally to me. They've been here, like in my heart. They've been here to tell me that I'm making the right decision, that, you know, showing me kindness. And I always let people know this isn't something that I normally would do on every year, but especially during the pandemic, I felt like I needed to ground myself into my tradition, because something that like I just had like this moment of realizing, if I don't continue it, I sever the lineage. And that is something that I did not want to happen. Like I want my children, my children's children to remember who Tia Caritina was, who mi abuelita Jesus, who mi abuelito Soltero was, because they're important figures in our life. And even though I did not get to grow up with them because I am a first generation Mexican American, it meant that like even though I never grew up like quote unquote typical like Mexican life, it's like no, I'm here. This is a life that my parents wanted to create for us. They wanted that dream to happen. But I want to make sure that everybody who comes after me remembers that the fight and the struggle to make sure that this tradition happens, that I can vocalize that we are here and we're here to stay, and we are free, and we are going to chase freedom until we have it. So it meant something more than just celebration. It's also survival and making sure that this culture and this tradition survives. And so it being my first year doing it publicly, I feel such a connection to making sure that I not just share this with my own lineage, but community members to say, yeah, like, this is safe. This is like, it is okay to do this publicly. It is no longer taboo. It's no longer something meant to be hidden. We are allowed to be our authentic selves, and we are allowed to celebrate what we have fought so hard, and our ancestors have fought so hard to make sure even an inkling of our tradition survive. And so for me, it is for those who are really close to me, it's that I got to meet. I had the fortune to meet for a week. My abuelitas, mi abuelitos, the people who I didn't get to meet and that I will never know, not even their names, because of the destruction of colonization. I will still remember them despite that. And I will remember every tribe that I could possibly be from. Like, I never want to let go of that. Colonization tried to sever that connection from me and my indigenous ancestors, Afro-Indigenous, Euro-Indigenous, whatever it may be. I want to make sure that that is remembered. Colonialism will never win.
No, and that is very special. And thank you for sharing that and exploring that side. I am Mexican, and I grew up with my parents teaching me about Dia De Los Muertos. I remember going to the cemetery, but it was before Dia De Los Muertos, so I got to see the display, and it was very beautiful. But it was never in me to make an ofrenda, not until my little brother was born. And he started it. He was curious about it, and he started making altars. He has this huge altar in our house. It's very beautiful. He's 14 now, so he's not that little, but he started very young. I call him still little brother, right? So he has this beautiful, huge altar with my grandparents, and it was very special to just see him create this all on his own, and curious to learn about it and investigate and try to learn and find stories. He doesn't remember very much about my grandparents, but he got to hear from my parents and myself. So I think that's the special thing about it. Isabel, I want to talk with you. Do you find that, in building this huge altar, that people are curious to learn about different stories and connecting?
Yes, one of the things that I noticed that a lot of people, they never have done it before, just got instilled to do it and learn about the beautiful thing about it, that we have to keep remember our loved ones and keep teaching our children about it. So last year I saw several houses when I walked by Pilsen. They did a small altar outside the houses, and that was nice. That was my plan, my thing, that other people can keep doing it. That it doesn't get forgotten. And I love it. And when people come over and see and why you do it, and they think we never have done it in our homes. And I'm like, you don't have to be Mexican. You don't have to be Hispanic to do this, to remember your loved ones. And there's some other people who are not Hispanic that they thinking, oh, that's a real nice thing to remember our loved ones. We're gonna try to do it the same, because it's a human thing. You don't have to belong to certain group of people. You just celebrate the people that they're gone. They're gone, and it's just the thing that we have to keep our traditions and instill to our children, because when they're young, they don't want to think about this, but they have to realize that we're gonna die as well. But and not to see that as something sad, something real bad, because it's just part of our life.
Very true. And
so it will be much easier to deal with that. Like in my case, I couldn't think that it was two people. I have two of my families who died of COVID. A brother, he died in January of COVID. And a very close friend that it was, my mom, she grew up with her. They were like sisters. She was like my aunt, and she was November the 3rd just a day after the 8 of them.
I'm so sorry.
And it was real sad. It just hit us like, she died all of a sudden of COVID. And this is the saddest thing, that a lot of very healthy people, very young people, they ended up going into the hospital, and 2-3 weeks later, they're gone.
And you keep saying, you said something about, anyone could die at any time. You don't have to be necessarily old, Norma, I want to go to you. Did you see that because of COVID, that people maybe were more aware that this is our reality, that, death could be at any time?
Yeah, I think this year everybody has suffered some form of loss. We've all lost, jobs and houses and money, and the worst is we've lost loved ones for sure. Like I said, I work with the Logan Square Neighborhood Association, and we did a lot of solidarity work where we were trying to give people money. And what we found is a lot of times that there are whole families that were sick, and, kids that were losing both parents or grandparents. I mean, there's been profound loss in our communities due to COVID. I lost my father early this January. So it's been a rough year for everybody. We've all
I'm so sorry.
experienced something terrible.
I'm so sorry for your loss.
I think it's really important what Santa say, like death and dying is something that is universal, and every culture has their rituals, their ways to remember. Every culture, I mean, Halloween comes from Samhain. Samhain comes from the Celtic Indo-European traditions. And yeah, everybody should, in my opinion, remember the people who die. Day of the Dead is a Mexican tradition. So, there is a way of doing it when the Mexican people or Mexican American people do it. We do Day of the Dead. And then other people from other cultures do their own tradition. And I think, as Santa said, it's very healthy that people are remember. I mean, we all are carrying a lot of pain this year. We all have had, I mean, in this very room, we all have had somebody that we lost from COVID. So I think it's very important that we differentiate, that everybody can honor, and it will be very healthy if everybody honor those who pass, taking off the almost sanitization of death that happens on the Anglo cultures. If you think about it, when you look at people of Mexican descent or Mexican American, we are not afraid of dying. And we are not afraid of dying because we know it's part of life, And people from other cultures, they're so afraid of dying because they don't continue their indigenous traditions, like Samhain, like any other, Indo-European, African traditions, etc. So every person of every culture, it will be a very healthy practice to go to the roots of their indigenous ancestry and what did my culture do to celebrate the dead. We Mexicans, we do Day of the Dead. It's recognized by the United Nations, as an oral and intangible world heritage because it comes from Mexico and it's a Mexican thing. So I think it's very healthy that we all celebrate. And I cannot wait until we are at Brewja Co and we celebrate and everybody comes and they bring their photos and hopefully come and listen to the part where I'm talking, because I love talking about this.
And I see you have beautiful artwork behind you. You have the flowers.
Oh, yes. I have my family. When you were asking earlier, I got my mommy and I got my stepson. Unfortunately, they're part of our relationship has evolved to that level, and I truly believe it's that, we don't say goodbye, we say hasta luego,
And talking about that, someone who, maybe is from our culture and is struggling, and wants to connect and wants to start, making an ofrenda, really remembering and really, celebrating Day of the Dead, what would be some of your advice? especially with having to deal with someone who had recently just passed?
4 basic things for the ofrenda, especially if you want to keep it like very traditional indigenous. Get your flowers, get your fruit, get your photo, and get your sugar skull. And for the love of the goddess, go to Norma for your sugar skull. Go to all the artisans and Pilsens. Don't go to the big store, big box stores. You throw a rock in Chicago, you're gonna find a Mexican artisan that can give you a Day of the Dead, but sell you a Day of the Dead. And please don't haggle, you know, because and buy from Mexican artisans because the art is beautiful. The aesthetics are beautiful. Support the people where the aesthetics come from, you know, because again, appropriation is horrible. With those 4 things, you know, you get your photo, you get your fruit, you get your flower, you get your sugar skull, you set up the altar and you set up time to welcome them. And if you want to go all out and make tamales or buy tamales, you know, and do your thing.
Who's going to say no to tamales? I mean,
Yeah, but especially to find the time of reflection and communion. Find the time to reflect about the people that you're honoring and commune with it. Commune with them, talk to them. If you've never done this, don't be afraid. You know, they're your family, they're your loved ones. And if you didn't have a relationship with that person, then maybe ease your way into this new way of the relationship, you know. Now I'm talking from a very spiritual point of view. There are ancestors who don't like to be remembered. I mean, my mom was one of them. She didn't want to know altars. She didn't want to know, you know, memories. So I had to print this photo today for this because I don't have like, you know, a bunch of photos of my mom because she didn't want it. You know, like Norma
you
was saying.
respect that, and you
Absolutely, absolutely. And the photo comes out on the season because she died on October 27th. So I put the photo on October 27th and November 3rd is gone because those were her wishes, and you know, but it's easy to connect with them. Let a dear friend of mine told me this, that goddess or God or the divine or source or whatever you call that energy talks to us through our imagination. So allow your imagination to be the source, the way to reach the divine and to reach your loved ones. They will talk. They will talk back if you talk to them.
I want to touch really quickly. Do you feel that the movie Coco was a good representation of what El Dia de los Muertos is? If you know, Carina or Norma or Esperanza, one of you want to comment on it.
I love Coco. I loved it. I thought it was beautiful. It was just gorgeous. I know they did their research. I mean, obviously it's Disney, right? But it was beautiful. I thought it was beautiful. I took my parents to watch it. We watched it as a family. It was one of the first movies we went to the theater to see together. So, I mean.
I recently had a workshop at Firebird Art Center, and I love the reference of it's like the movie Coco.
Yes.
So we go back to that educational moment, right? Where the foundations are there, and I think we can start there.
I just felt so much pride watching Goku. Like, I went with one of my friends. I have never bawled so hard throughout the entire movie. There was not a moment, like, you know, there
Even
was
afterwards, just thinking about it, you're like, oh, that one part.
yeah, no, it was just everything was just so beautiful. Like, there was not a moment, like, I actually forgot real life for a second, and I was in the movie too. And the cultural references, and just, you know, also seeing my abuelita up there too. I was just like, oh, I know her too. Like, it was just such profound pride and happiness to be able to see people like me up there and to know that it was done in a way that was respectful and mindful of my culture.
Very quickly. Yes, I loved it. No religious references, but indigenous references, cultural references. Loved it. Loved it.
I'm glad. Do you think that it's a good a good place for people who've never celebrated Day of the Dead, have no idea what it is, to just kind of get an idea of why we celebrate it. Because I think that if you walk down the street, I feel like I used to live in New York, and I remember walking down Manhattan, tons of restaurants promoting Dia de los Muertos, right? So it was very interesting for me. But do you think that's a good reference or a good point for people to watch and just kind of get an idea?
You know, it's also very imaginative. They added things in there, and it's supposed to be, right? It's an animation. So they used their imagination. They added a few extra things, like, you know, alebrije, not necessarily part of the celebration, but, you know, they're beautiful, fanciful creations. But I think what it did is in order to make something palatable for a larger group of people, right? They have to sort of break it down to some fundamentals. And I think that it's an okay starting point, because it does talk about life after death, or you know, the next realms, or get people to think about that. So that's good. They didn't try to strip that out of it. But yeah, it's I think it's still important for people to know that it's just a starting point, and different parts of Mexico celebrate it differently. Different cities in the United States celebrate it differently. And that's part of the beauty and the strength of it. That's why it's survived so long, because you don't have to put on somebody else's rituals. You can actually include your own rituals. And I just want to add a little bit to the last question that was brought up. You know, so I've been to various cities and towns, tiny little towns in Mexico, studying Day of the Dead, you know, for many years. And it's in the preparation where I find a lot of the magic and the beauty. It's in going to the mercado to get the flowers. It's in making the food that's going to be prepared that day. It's in bundling up the baskets that we're going to carry to the cemetery, where all the stories just start coming out. And I think that one of the fundamental ideas or elements that should be a part of anybody's Day of the Dead is talking about people's lives who are still important, and sharing those stories. When you share those stories and look for their photos, the search in the photo albums is beautiful. If children have not gone through them with you, you know, going through and saying, this is your tia, this is your tío, this is when he had this beautiful motorcycle, or, you know, she used to do this, and that is the magic. That is what keeps them alive. And so the preparation and looking for photos and doing the getting ready is part of the whole thing.
Well, thank you everyone for sharing that. I loved hearing from each and every one of you. So I hope everyone has a great weekend celebrating Dia de los Muertos. And again, I just want to thank you all. I have an ofrenda in my home, so it's something that I've even learned, you know, how to sit there and speak with my loved ones, because, you know, it's at first it can be a little odd for someone who's not used to it, but I thought it was very special that everyone finds their own journey and their own experience. And I think it's incredible that everyone's sharing it and pass it on with different people. I think that's very important nowadays. So I want to thank you all for taking the time and joining us today. And I just want to quickly say, thank you for participating in today's Chicago Tonight's Latino Voices, a WTTW news community conversation. Be sure to tune into Chicago Tonight, Latino Voices and Black Voices on Saturdays and Sundays starting at 6 p.m. on Channel 11. I also want to mention we shared a short form in the chat. If you click on it, you can submit ideas, stories, topics, and issues to us that we need to be covering. Please take the moment to fill that out and share your thoughts. And again, please join Chicago Tonight Black Voices and host Brandis Freeman for next month's community conversation on Monday, November 29th at 8 p.m. And thank you again for all of you for joining us. I hope you all have a great night.
Thank you.
Yeah.